Okay, can everybody see this? Uh, okay. Oh, wait a second. Okay, does everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. So, highly pathogenic avian influenza, better known as bird flu, is still an ongoing global crisis. Tonight, I'll provide an update and highlight how industrial animal agriculture is fueling its spread and could help usher in the next human pandemic. Even though humans remain relatively spared heading into bird flu's fifth year, I am no less concerned. First, let's make sure everyone has a basic understanding of the CAFO model of animal food production. CAFOs, short for concentrated animal feeding operations, are often referred to as factory farms because of their industrial nature. A CAFO is a subtype of animal feeding operation, or AFO, that confines a higher number of animals. AFOs congregate densely packed animals and their waste on a relatively small land area. Feed is brought to them. They live, eat, and sleep where they urinate and defecate. Vast amounts of manure are collected and stored before being applied to farm fields. There's nothing natural about how CAFO animals are raised. Sadly, about 99% of livestock and poultry in the US are raised in CAFOs. I thought this Food and Water Watch map might be of interest to you. As of 2022, Massachusetts had just 3 factory farms. So, for the people who live in Massachusetts, your state is relatively fortunate. The darker the color, the greater the livestock density. The Midwest bears the brunt of industrial animal agriculture, with additional hotspots in California, Idaho, Texas, and North Carolina. Okay, so this is a busy slide, but it summarizes the widespread harms caused by factory farms. Many, like water pollution and harmful air emissions, including greenhouse gases, are fairly well known, especially among environmental advocates like all of you. Less appreciated is that CAFOs also create ideal conditions for the emergence and spread of infectious diseases, including viruses with pandemic potential. It really pains me to include this slide. I've given this talk twice, and this is the first time I've used this slide. Bird flu continues to rage through wild birds and animals and infect farm animals globally, yet in the US, pandemic preparedness has been deprioritized. In my professional opinion, the next pandemic is it's not a question of if, but when. And it may not arrive in a distant wet market, but right here in a US CAFO. Highly pathogenic avian influenza is a prime contender. The crowded, unnatural, and stressful conditions in CAFOs create the perfect storm for the bird flu virus to evolve into a pandemic capable strain, especially if it gains a foothold in pigs. More on pigs later. And even if the next pandemic influenza virus isn't homegrown, CAFOs will help spread it. All right. Now, I apologize for this. I have a friend who says sometimes I get too sciency, and this is a sciency slide, but bear with me. In scientific parlance, the bird flu virus of current concern is known as HPAI A H5N1 2.3.4.4b. Translation: HPAI stands for highly pathogenic avian influenza. It is deadly to birds, causing mass die-offs. LPAI, or low pathogenic avian influenza, is more common and causes mild disease, but it can evolve into HPAI. The A refers to the type of influenza virus. Type A can infect both humans and animals, which is why it poses a pandemic risk. Type B infects humans only and causes seasonal flu. H5N1 designates the subtype based on surface protein composition with many, many possible combinations. 2.3.4.4b refers to the clade, a subgroup of a subtype. Clades are the descendants of a given subtype. Clades can be further divided into genotypes. More on genotypes later. Okay, we're past the sciencey stuff. Okay, so the H5N1 subtype likely evolved from an LPAI virus circulating in wild birds. It was first detected in 1996 after an outbreak at an outdoor rearing goose farm, essentially a goose CAFO in Guangdong, China. From there, it spread into market poultry populations and then back into wild birds, first reported in Hong Kong waterfowl in 2002. From there, it spread globally via migratory birds across Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America. In the US, H5N1 wasn't detected until late 2021, first in wild birds, then shortly thereafter in poultry. Unlike the 2014-2015 outbreak, which involved different subtypes and burned out within about a year, this virus is different. It is persistent, uncontained, and now permanently established in the wild. CAFO geese, being waterfowl, rely on water bodies, creating ideal conditions for viral exchange with wild birds. These photos of a lionhead goose CAFO in Guangdong Province, China, illustrate how industrial animal operations can select for HPAI viruses. What came first, the CAFO or the HPAI virus? While LPA viruses have long circulated in wild birds, industrial animal agriculture has likely accelerated the evolution of HPAI viruses, including H5N1. Its LPAI predecessor may have been born in the wild, but CAFOs have likely bred and spread it. Bird flu isn't just a threat to wild birds and farm animals. It has infected many different wild mammals, as well as domestic cats. More on cats later. This map shows confirmed detections in mammals across the US since May of 2022. The virus isn't just persisting, it's spreading geographically, both here in the US and globally. Illness varies widely by species, from asymptomatic to severe and deadly. Some animals are temporary dead end hosts. They don't transmit the virus. Others act as permanent reservoirs, maintaining and spreading the virus, giving it more chances to evolve into a strain that can spread efficiently between people. Influenza A viruses have long circulated in birds, pigs, and humans, evolving through two key mechanisms, mutation and reassortment. Mutations are small genetic changes caused by random replication, multiplication errors that build up over time. Reassortment is the evolutionary fast track. When different influenza A viruses co-infect the same host, they can swap gene segments, sometimes producing a radically new virus with pandemic potential. Let me make this real. I promised more on pigs, and here it is. The deadly 2009 H1N1 swine flu pandemic exemplifies the starring role industrial animal agriculture can play in pandemic production. The virus formed through multiple reassortments between human, swine, and avian strains. It hit children especially hard. My sister-in-law's niece ended up in the ICU and very nearly died. Pig CAFOs were central. Research shows ancestral flu strains circulated and mixed in pig populations for years before the virus spilled into humans. This is why we can't really be complacent. The virus, influenza viruses are patient. The outbreak's epicenter, Mexico. after pigs were imported from the US and Europe. The system that enabled the 2009 H1N1 pandemic is still in place. In October 2024, bird flu was detected in two backyard pigs in Oregon. The likely source was infected poultry sharing water, housing, and equipment. Why is the jump to pigs concerning? Pigs are ideal influenza A mixing vessels because they can be infected with bird, swine, and human flu strains at the same time. Pig CAFOs are veritable reassortment hubs. Right now, thank goodness, transmission to humans remains inefficient and there is no evidence of pig to human spread. But if bird flu adapts to and establishes itself in swine, the risk of a reassortment strain with human pandemic potential increases dramatically. And there is already evidence that this may be starting to happen. I'll come back to that. Okay, now let's shift to cows. The spillover into pigs was expected, given that pigs are natural influenza A hosts. But the jump to dairy cattle was unprecedented and alarming. Now, yet another CAFO livestock species is fueling the still ongoing bird flu crisis, increasing the risk of a pandemic. Infection in dairy cows was first confirmed in March 2024. In another alarming development, the first cow to human case was reported soon after. About a year later, nearly 1,000 dairy herds in 17 states had been infected. Infection was far more widespread than known at the outset. A study found that over one-third of retail milk samples from April 13th through May 3rd, 2024, tested positive for H5N1, while fewer than 0.1% of U.S. dairy herds were officially reported as infected. By the way, no infections have been found in beef cattle. The next slide provides part of the explanation. Scientists discovered early on that the virus has a predilection for cow mammary glands and that milk from infected cows contains astronomical numbers of viral particles. While bird flu appears to spread mostly through contact with infected cows, and exposure to raw milk, that's bird flu in cows, by the way, the risk of airborne transmission cannot be dismissed. The ag industry downplays the fact that bird flu is a respiratory virus. All influenza viruses are respiratory viruses. These snotty-nosed bird flu infected cows are undeniable proof. While viral concentrations are higher in mammary gland tissue and milk, make no mistake, respiratory secretions from dairy cattle with bird flu contain infectious virus. This New York Times article from February 2025 asks, could the bird flu become airborne? Well, I've got news for the Times. If it's an influenza virus, as I've stated, it spreads through the air. Airborne viruses remain suspended in the air against gravity and can disperse longer distances than heavier respiratory droplets. Windborne spread from poultry facilities is another likely transmission pathway. The USDA primarily identifies direct bird-to-bird contact and contaminated surfaces or materials as the main bird flu transmission routes in poultry. But a Czech study suggests wind can carry poultry litter dust containing infectious virus blown outdoors by ventilation fans up to 2 miles, bypassing biosecurity barriers. Oops. There we go. Soon after the jump to dairy cattle, the USDA mandated testing of lactating cows before interstate movement. Never mind that this didn't address intra-state movement. No surprise that this wasn't enough to stop the spread between herds. Why? The milk truck circled in red provides a clue. Milk truck routes often include multiple dairies. Remember, raw milk from infected cows is teeming with virus. The virus can survive on environmental surfaces, including clothing and footwear, for hours to days, sometimes longer. Transmission via contaminated vehicles, equipment, and workers plays a significant role in farm-to-farm spread. Although researchers established early on just how infectious raw milk is, the USDA did not begin rolling out mandatory nationwide bulk tank milk testing until nearly 9 months after spillover into dairy cattle was first identified. Right? Is bird flu showing any signs of slowing down in wild birds? Detections in the U.S. wax and wane with the seasonal migration of waterfowl, the primary reservoir, but continue to occur year-round with no overall downward trend. Remember, the virus has become permanently established in a variety of non-migratory bird species and resident animal hosts. Unlike past bird flu strains, this one may never burn out. Is bird flu fizzling in U.S. poultry? Not as of March 20th, 2026, just 6 days ago, according to Dr. Chelsea Shively, a veterinarian and critical issues manager for the USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. Quote, the current outbreak of HPAI in the U.S. has reached unprecedented levels, end quote. And the count has increased from more than 197 million birds on March 20th to, I think, over almost 206 million today and counting. Yeah, almost 206 million. Bird flu has reached every state. It is nearly 100% fatal in chickens and turkeys. If it hits a flock, the outcome is the same, death from the virus or mandated culling. The USDA divides flocks into two categories, commercial and backyard. But here's the catch. Sub-commercial threshold, yet still sizable confined poultry operations are exempt from having an audited biosecurity plan and are still labeled backyard for reporting purposes. Yet these so-called backyard flocks still qualify for taxpayer-funded indemnity payments despite lacking an audited biosecurity plan. Blurring the distinction between true backyard flocks, what we think of as backyard flocks, and industrial scale operations obscures the reality that bird flu disproportionately impacts the latter. What's the current bird flu situation in humans in the US? So far, 71 H5N1 cases have been confirmed, mostly linked to exposure to dairy cattle and poultry. That number has not changed since I gave this talk in early 2025. There has been no known person-to-person spread, at least not yet. Most human infections have been mild, but rare deaths have occurred. The second U.S. death in November 2025 involved a different subtype, H5N5, previously reported in animals but not in humans. Right now, the public health risk to humans is low, but that could change. The virus continues to decimate wild bird and mammal populations, particularly seals and sea lions, creating post-apocalyptic scenes like this. Bird flu isn't just an agricultural crisis, it's an ecological disaster, and as author Dr. Michael Greger aptly put it, a virus of our own hatching. Mink CAFOs, where animals are intensely raised for their fur, deserve special attention. Minks are highly susceptible to avian influenza. Like pigs, minks can be infected with both avian and human influenza strains. There are influenza viruses. Therefore, like pig CAFOs, mink CAFOs are potential reassortment factories. In the 2022 outbreak in Spain, strong evidence of efficient mink-to-mink spread created opportunities for viral evolution. And indeed, although no mink to human transmission occurred, the virus contained a concerning mutation associated with improved adaptation to mammals. The more the virus adapts to mammals, the greater the pandemic risk. A warning for cat lovers like me. Big cats and domestic cats are highly susceptible to bird flu with high reported mortality rates. Most domestic cat victims live on bird flu infected premises. Most infections in cats result from contact with infected non-feline animals, ingestion of raw animal products, or exposure to contaminated environments. Some cases have been linked to commercially produced raw pet food and raw milk. There has been no confirmed cat to human spread. While cats are usually dead end hosts, evidence suggests limited big cat to cat transmission. As we've discussed, bird flu continues to rip through poultry CAFOs. Now I want to dismantle a common industry myth about why. The claim, cage-free systems increase the risk of bird flu spread. The reality, confining large numbers of densely packed animals, cage or no cage, increases the risk of bird flu spread. It's the CAFO model, not cage-free. Blaming the cage becomes an excuse to roll back cage-free laws because cage-free systems increase production costs. In February 2025, the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture announced a five-pronged strategy to battle bird flu and lower egg prices. No surprise, it props up big egg and big poultry, including higher indemnity payments to speed repopulation after mass cullings. The plan does include funding for vaccine and therapeutics research, but it over-relies on killing infected flocks, rapid restocking, and boosting biosecurity. Guess who pays for all of that? The U.S. taxpayer, of course, foots the bill for depopulation, carcass disposal, lost revenue, and repopulation. Taxpayer dollars also fund optional biosecurity assessments and up to 75% of the cost to fix the highest risk biosecurity problems identified. Talk about too big to fail. Is good biosecurity enough to control the spread of bird flu as USDA messaging implies? Short answer, no. Biosecurity matters, it's important, but it's not enough. And biosecurity is only as good as real-world compliance. A Dutch study found a high degree of biosecurity breaches in 6 out of 7 monitored poultry farms. Bird flu was first detected for the first time in a dairy cow outside of the US in January 2026 in the Netherlands after a cat on a dairy farm died. The cow had recently recovered from mastitis and a respiratory infection, despite reassurance by government officials that no further spread had been detected. Oh, a week later, government officials reported that additional testing on the farm identified 4 other cows with bird flu antibodies, indicative of past infection. The disease report summary frames the risk as very low, but finding antibodies in multiple animals suggests this was not an isolated event. It was just a matter of time. Back to pigs. Scientists are warning of a rising human health risk from bird flu in pigs. Bird flu has infected more than those 2 backyard pigs in Oregon. Based on serologic evidence, it has infected pigs in Asia, Europe, and Africa. Experimental studies show that most infections cause little or no illness and spread poorly between pigs. But the virus can still replicate in pigs and occasionally be shed to other animals, and sometimes mutate in ways that helps it adapt to mammals. We've seen this before. Remember the 2009 swine flu virus circulated in pigs for years before it evolved to spread easily, not only person to person, but also back and forth between pigs and people. The same H5N1 clade 2.3.4.4b has been wreaking havoc in North America since December 2021. That's when it first hit wild birds. It was in February 2022 that the first poultry outbreak happened. Two genotypes are currently driving events. The B3.13 genotype was first detected in dairy cattle in March 2024, an alarming first. Genotype D1.1 emerged later in 2024 in wild birds. Like B3.13, it has also spilled over into poultry and dairy cattle. Bird flu continues to ravage wild and domesticated bird and mammalian populations, providing ongoing opportunities for viral evolution. D1.1 has been the predominant genotype circulating in North American flyways since late 2024. It's too soon to say, but D1.1 may be associated with more severe disease and higher mortality in animals and humans. B3.13 infections in humans have generally been mild, whereas D1.1 has caused the only human deaths and the only near fatal case reported in North America to date. Based on a study published just this month, D1.1 appears better adapted than B3.13 to replicate in human nasal and airway tissues. An unsettling finding for this infectious disease doctor. Before wrapping up, a brief public service announcement. To protect yourself and your pets, avoid contact with infected animals, steer clear of contaminated environments, and don't consume raw animal products. Pasteurization inactivates the bird flu virus, as well as many other pathogens. Cats are particularly vulnerable, so keep them indoors. And while the seasonal flu shot doesn't protect against bird flu directly, it does reduce the chance of co-infection, lowering the risk of dangerous viral mixing. Another HPAI subtype decimated an industrial breeder facility in Mississippi about a year ago. It likely evolved from an LPAI virus introduced by wild birds. CAFOs aren't collateral damage. They are bird flu incubators and amplifiers. And H5N1 isn't the only influenza virus with pandemic potential. If not this or that HPAI subtype, clade, or genotype now, then another one later. It's not a matter of if, but when, and which one will cross the pandemic threshold. Look, I am not placing the blame entirely on industrial animal agriculture. There were influenza pandemics long before there were CAFOs, but raising large numbers of animals in confinement increases the risk. And then there's all those other harms associated with industrial animal agriculture. To close, this headline perfectly captures the problem. And the title of this Compassion in World Farming report points to part of the solution, major farm reforms, but not only major farm reforms. Prioritizing whole, minimally processed plant-based foods matters, not only for reducing bird flu risk, but for protecting the health of people, animals, and the planet we all share. And yes, faux fur too. And that is the end.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. That was an excellent presentation and very scary to think about this, but well, now we know. So this is a very serious risk. I have one question that I was thinking about is that many people like to think that they're doing the right thing by eating, free range meat or even having backyard chickens for eggs, and but they are just as susceptible to bird flu, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I showed that slide about, quote unquote commercial versus backyard flocks. And what we think of as backyard flocks, what you described, certainly are susceptible. Those birds are in contact with nature. they're living the life, but living the life does, come with the risk of coming into contact with infected birds. So yeah, that is a risk.
Okay. And does anyone else have any other questions for Cheryl?
No questions because I just so thoroughly covered everything, right? Or
To finance these factory farm deals that are really pushing expansion. We're going to look at just a little bit at the risks to the.
Yeah, Kim, you're on mute. Kim, you're on mute. Yes, Kim, you're on mute. Yeah, please take yourself off mute.
Studies about it.
Okay. I was curious if Europe or China are really doing anything differently than the US.
well, that's a good question, and I am gonna you've just given me some homework.
Sorry, didn't
No,
mean to do
no.
that.
It's interesting because, the main focus of my, work with Sierra Club and other organizations has been, biogas, manure biogas, and I've certainly looked into what they're doing in Europe and other countries regarding that issue. So yeah, I'm going to admit that I don't know, and I have some homework, but that's not a bad thing. Great question.
All right. Also, I'm wondering is that you did include this in your slides that ducks and geese, well, obviously, that's where it started at a goose farm, are just as susceptible as chickens to the bird flu and just as in
Well,
just as
I
much danger.
think chickens and turkeys, like bird flu, is virtually, well, there's susceptibility and then there's mortality. So yes, wild waterfowl, and other birds are susceptible, but not all of them, like chickens and turkeys, have a nearly 100% mortality rate. Like ducks, for example, their mortality rate is lower. So I don't know, species by species. I just know that, chickens and turkeys, it's a death sentence.
Any other questions? All right, I'll stop recording.